Hey guys, it's Emma Vigling with TYT Politics. I'm here with Sansara Taylor. You are with refusefascism.org, as they can see in the posters behind you, or hopefully they can see. You're planning a massive action tomorrow on November 4th. It's Friday the 3rd, to resist the Trump administration, to essentially say that they have to go. And it's going to be held in New York and LA and a variety of other cities. Can you talk about your action and how it all came together and why you think this is the right time to say no to the Trump administration?
Yeah, tomorrow, November 4th, we are launching actually a sustained movement of mass nonviolent political protest to demand this nightmare must end, the Trump-Pence regime must go. And we're saying this because the Trump-Pence regime is a catastrophe for humanity. This is a fascist regime. They are bringing back open white supremacy. Donald Trump is threatening the world with a nuclear holocaust. They are assaulting the press. They are stripping away and assaulting civil liberties. This is carrying out xenophobic, anti-immigrant raids and terror. This is a very dangerous regime. And millions of people know this. They hate it. They're horrified. They're disgusted. They're outraged. But they're being told, you have to wait till 2018. You have to wait till 2020. And refusefascism.org is saying, no, that's too late. We can't allow this regime. Every day it's in power, it carries out a greater nightmare. You look at the genocidal neglect of the people of Puerto Rico. You look at the assault on women's right to birth control and abortion and stripping away coverage. Every day the regime and the nightmare worsens, and every day it's normalized. And only the people acting ourselves, going into the streets, taking the responsibility, not just hoping somebody takes care of it, but taking the responsibility ourselves, can stop this nightmare. So we're launching nonviolent political protests tomorrow that will grow day after day and going from thousands to millions until we create the kind of political crisis in this country where the regime is forced to step down, to be impeached, to be driven from power one way or the other.
So I see that it's actions against the Trump-Pence regime. So I would assume that impeachment of Donald Trump is not your end goal, because Mike Pence represents that regime as well.
That's right. Mike Pence has stood behind every dangerous white supremacist fascist threat and action that Trump has made. And you add to that the fact that Mike Pence is a religious Christian fascist theocrat. I mean, the only thing separating Mike Pence from the Taliban is 6,000 miles and what the name of his God is. He believes that LGBTQ people should have no rights. It should be legal to discriminate against them. He believes that women should be forced to have children against their will. He actually, when he was governor in Indiana, he sent a woman to prison for allegedly self-inducing or probably having a dangerous miscarriage. She went to the hospital. They sent her to prison. This is a nightmare, and he's part of it. So while impeachment, look, if we have enough of an upsurge, maybe impeachment is part of how Donald Trump will be removed from office. That'd be a good start, but we're not stopping then, because it is a whole regime. It's Mike Pence, it's Jeff Sessions, it's John Kelly, who thinks that Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general, was an honorable man. This white supremacy is steeped into the entire regime, and the whole regime must go.
So what do you say to people who say Donald Trump was democratically elected? He obviously didn't win the popular vote, but he did win by the rules of the game with the Electoral College. What do they say I know that he has a 33% popularity at this point, which is dismal, but he was elected. What do you say to people who say, why are you trying to remove a democratically elected leader?
Well, I think no election, fair or fraudulent, can legitimize and make acceptable a genocidal fascist regime, a woman-hating regime, an anti-LGBT regime, a xenophobic nationalist regime. I would remind people that Hitler was democratically elected. Do we look back at the German people and say, oh, it's so good they respected the democratic process? No, we look back at them and say, how did they go along? It was spelled out plain as day, and they went along. And I know there was fear and there was terror and there was normalization, there was disbelief, but all of that is playing out today as well. And Donald Trump has told us who he is. He stood in front of the world and said that we're fine people carrying torches and chanting Nazi slogans in Charlottesville after they murdered Heather Heyer. Believe him when he tells you who he is and act on that. So it does not matter. There are things that are bigger than then who won the popular vote, as you pointed out, was not Trump. But yeah, no election, fair or fraudulent, can legitimate this. And the other thing is, anybody who thinks that respecting Donald Trump's presidency is going to preserve any semblance of democracy in this country is deluding themselves. The biggest enemy to the democratic rights of the people is this regime. They're assailing the First Amendment. They're saying they want to imprison flag burners. They're threatening the press. Donald Trump is constantly threatening the courts. I have a lot of criticisms of the way this system has functioned before Trump. I'm not a big fan of American democracy personally, although people in our movement are. We have a great diversity of perspectives. But there's no way that respecting this regime, it is antithetical to the interests of humanity, to the interests of the people in this country, and frankly, to any semblance of democratic rights in this country.
Well, you discussed the suppression of opposition, and that is a cornerstone of what defines fascism. We throw fascism around a lot in this country. The right does, the left does, but Trump does epitomize fascist tendencies in that he's an authoritarian leader. He has surrounded himself by religious nutjobs who want to essentially suppress any opposition. Antifa and anti-fascist movements like yourself, refusefascism.org, he's called out directly in an effort to suppress your voices. He also says that Antifa and Refuse Fascism and fascist or anti-fascist organizations are violent.
You know, they show up in the helmets and the black masks, and they've got clubs and they've got everything. Antifa!
How do you respond to that?
Well, refusefascism.org has put out a statement on our website. We've promoted it all over the place, denouncing the shameful, dangerous, and wrong attacks and demonization of Antifa. We've been portrayed as interchangeable with Antifa. We are not. But Refuse Fascism is a movement that's made up of a great diversity of people coming from different perspectives, all of whom recognize that there's a fascist regime that poses an existential danger to humanity, and we're standing together against that. We organize mass nonviolent political protest. In that, and we think that's the way that you can draw in the millions. There's no shortcut besides mobilizing millions. And everybody sitting on the sidelines who hates Donald Trump, you have to join us in the streets. That's our message. There's no substitute for that, and that's going to be a mass nonviolent movement. Having said that, we completely oppose all the divide and conquer tactics that try to pit some protesters against others. There is no moral equivalency between those who are imposing fascism and white supremacy and misogyny and xenophobia and America First chauvinism and those who are standing up against it. And so I think this is very important that people not buy into that narrative, not do the distancing of Antifa or a lot of the anti-communism that's also being whipped up, including on the left. We have to stand together against a fascist regime. And you did mention that the word fascist gets thrown around a lot. And I think it's important to say that fascism, it has a real meaning. And when we use that word, we're not using it as an insult. We are recognizing that fascism, there's many different definitions that scholars have put forward and historians, but by any of the major definitions, Donald Trump and his regime fit that definition. And to us, we've really emphasized at the core of it is the discarding of even nominal protections of democratic rights of the people and the open institution of a terroristic form of dictatorship that demonizes one group of people after the other, Muslims, immigrants, black people, one group after the other, and dissenters and protesters and communists and Antifa, one group after the other, and rules both through the terror of the state and through the terror of the mob that gets unleashed. And you see all of that going on under this regime. And the lesson of history is you have to stop that before it becomes too late.
Well, and it's interesting, you have kind of, you would say, good Germans, people who just kind of go along with it, but if you have movements in the streets, it's harder for people to ignore. And what's fascinating to me is that there is this whole angry group online, fueled by people like Alex Jones, who are so they have authoritarian tendencies and following tendencies, and the dear leader can do no wrong. And they've gone after, because of what Alex Jones has done, your group. Can you talk about what that onslaught has been like?
Yeah, so actually since we started in December, shortly after the election of Donald Trump, we've been hit by a campaign of lies, distortions, and threats from the alt-right, the far-right, the conspiracy theory, white supremacist echo chamber of the internet, including Alex Jones. This has grown over the months, and it actually is a part of fascism. It's existed in this country, this reactionary dark corners of the internet, but it's also been encouraged and brought out in the daylight by Donald Trump. And, Donald Trump has been on Alex Jones's show.
It's unbelievable.
Pardon me? Yeah, I know.
It's unbelievable that the President of the United States.
This is fringe lunacy, but it's lunacy, and it's being mainstreamed, and it's being given the backing of the most powerful state in the world, the only superpower on the planet. And so this has been going on, but in recent weeks and over the last month, Alex Jones and others have really whipped up this lie that November 4th, according to them, is going to be a violent civil war started by Antifa and communists, and they're going to come and behead all the white children. I mean, it's lunacy, but it's actually intended to, I think, a couple things. One, they recognize, not every wingnut supporter of them who's sending us threats, but at least some of them strategically recognize that given the widespread discontent in this country, the widespread anger at Trump and disgust, that it is actually viable. What refusefascism.org is calling for, which is to transform that sort of latent, existing, but not mobilized disgust and outrage into a political force that's not just asking somebody to do something about it or begging or waiting, but acting ourselves to change the course of history, to get out in the streets and make a demand and not stop until the regime is driven from power. They recognize that actually is a realistic strategic possibility. And so they are aiming to lie about it, intimidate people, distort it, threaten people. And to us, that's both a sign of the fascism that we're confronting. It is a sign that what we're doing has struck a chord and actually has strength and potential to it. And it means that we have to double our efforts and really call on everybody. Not just that we refuse to be intimidated, but others need to step forward, because we're not doing this to prove something about ourselves. We're not doing this because, oh, that's really my thing, is to go out and counter fascists. But in the name of humanity, we're not making this up. Donald Trump is playing nuclear roulette with the world. He threatened to annihilate a country of 26 million people. This is genocide he's talking about. And we have a responsibility to not be good Germans and to not be intimidated. And actually, I think the living contrast between the lies and the threats and the vile sexual degradation and white supremacy of Trump supporters against us, and the morality that we stand for, that we value the lives of people around the world as much as our own, that we celebrate our diversity, that we welcome people from different cultures and backgrounds and genders and sexual orientations. This is a great thing about what the world we're fighting for and how we need to fight against this now.
Lastly, I know you have a busy day with your action coming up, your massive action on, again, November 4th, guys. So the resist crowd, the hashtag resist crowd, is very different from Refuse Fascism and the people that are taking to the streets. I think a criticism that can be leveled at Democrats and limousine liberals using hashtag resist is that they don't provide really an alternative. What differentiates your movement, besides the fact that you're acting in the streets and participating in these mass actions, from the kind of passive resist Democratic Party centrism model?
Well, I think in America, people are really trained that the way you participate in politics is you leave it to others. Maybe every few years you go vote between the candidates that are given to you. And then you sit back and you hope that they take care of it. And then once in a while, if you're really outraged, you'll write them a letter and really beg them to do something for you. And what we're saying is, look, that's actually not the way history has ever changed. The civil rights weren't won by people sitting back and writing letters. They did freedom rides. They sat in. They put their bodies on the line. They went outside of normal official political channels. The struggle that ended the Vietnam War was people burning draft cards and walking out of school and doing teach-ins and doing protests and levitating the Pentagon. People were acting. History has never changed by sitting back. And right now, that's always been true, and that's true now. But the other thing is, it's especially true now. Donald Trump, every other day, you hear people, or maybe every day, say, he can't do that. That's not how things are done. That's not presidential. Because why? Because he's ripping up the norms, the political norms, the legal norms, the balance of powers. He's ripping up and demolishing the normal procedures. And when they say, you can't do that, he always does it anyhow, and then he barrels ahead and it becomes the new normal. And when he is not respecting the normal official political channels, you cannot rely on those channels to stop him. You have to take it upon yourself. So, we invite people in who are using the resist hashtag. We don't hold a grudge against you. A lot of people, they're waking up to political life in a new way, and they're doing what they think is the right thing to do. We're saying, come find refusefascism.org. Wherever you're coming from, join with this movement. We need to stand together. In the name of humanity, it is our responsibility to stop a fascist America, and we have to do that soon. So we start tomorrow, and we're building. The protests are going to grow every day after that. They're going to be punctuated each Saturday. So November 4th, we're going to be in the streets. November 11th, on Veterans Day, we're coming back. We'll be out every day between, but especially on the Saturday, against the war and the threats of war in North Korea, against North Korea. And on November 18th, our vision is we come out tomorrow with thousands, and by November 18th, we've fanned out through the society. Everybody who comes has become an organizer, and we come back 2 weeks later with 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as many people. And then we have a new plateau to step off from for an ongoing, sustained struggle that will not stop until this regime is out, because lives are at stake and the future is at stake.
Thanks so much for talking to me. Refusefascism.org, everyone. We'll put the link below. Thanks so much, Sansara.
Thank you, Emma.